The day I unlocked my new store for the first time, my landlord called me. I forgot to disconnect one camera. I saw your wife and her brother on the footage. Don't tell her. Come alone. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. I had just handed over 40 years of savings. I had just signed my name to the dream I'd spent a lifetime building. And somewhere inside those walls, a camera had recorded everything my wife never meant for me to see. I drove there alone, and what I watched on that screen changed everything. Thank you for being here with me. Before we dive in, leave a comment and tell me what are you doing right now while listening. Working, driving, or just taking a moment for yourself, I genuinely appreciate you being part of this moment. A quick note, some details in this story have been adjusted for storytelling and reflection. What matters most is the message it carries. I was standing in my new storefront wiping down a glass display counter when Harold Prescott called to tell me something that would unravel everything I'd built in the last 40 years. The phone rang at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. Outside Georgetown, Texas stretched quiet under December sun. I'd spent the morning organizing inventory boxes of compressor parts, refrigerant filters, replacement gaskets for industrial cooling systems. At 68 years old, I'd finally opened the appliance parts shop I'd dreamed about since my 20s, back when I was just another technician crawling into walk-in freezers at restaurant supply warehouses. "Mr. Travers," Harold said when I answered. His voice sounded careful, the way people sound when they're measuring every word. "I need to see you. Today. Alone." Harold Prescott was 74, a retired electrical engineer with kind eyes and steady hands, who'd owned this building for 31 years before leasing it to me. He'd seemed genuinely happy at our closing 3 days earlier, shaking my hand with the firm grip of someone who understood what it meant to build something from nothing. "Is something wrong, Mr. Prescott?" I asked. "With the building. Not the building." He paused. "There's footage, security camera footage, from the apartment upstairs. I need you to see it before you sign anything." My hand tightened on the phone. "Sign what?" "Come to my rental," he said. "The address is 2847 Oakmont. Don't tell your wife. Just you." The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, listening to the silence of my empty store. Upstairs in the apartment Marlene and I had moved into just 4 days ago, I could hear laughter, hers and her brother Wayne's deeper voice responding. They'd been up there all morning, Wayne helping her organize the kitchen, while I worked downstairs getting the shop ready for its opening. What was I about to sign that I didn't even know existed yet? 3 days earlier, on Monday morning, Harold had handed me the keys to this place. The sun had poured through the front windows, lighting up the fresh paint smell, and the wrapped sign still waiting to be hung. I'd taken those keys and felt 40 years of work validate itself in one small moment, the weight of brass in my palm, the click of the lock, turning the knowledge that this clean, sunlit space was mine. Marlene had stood beside me that morning, radiant in a blue dress I'd never seen before, taking photos with her phone. "Take a picture of us, Harold," she'd said, handing him her phone. "Eugene with his keys. This is our new beginning." She was 45, 23 years younger than me, and we'd been married 5 years. My first wife had died of cancer 8 years before I met Marlene. I'd thought I understood grief well enough to recognize genuine affection when it appeared. Marlene's smile that Monday morning had looked like every good thing I'd hoped remarriage could be. Harold had taken the photo, but when he handed the phone back, his eyes had lingered on Marlene for half a second too long. Not with attraction, with something else. Concern, maybe. Or recognition. 40 years I've owned this building, he'd said to me. I hope it treats you as well as it treated me, Mr. Travers. I'd smiled and said the thing you say when a dream finally becomes real. 40 years of work. Here it is. Now, 3 days later, I was driving across Georgetown toward his rental house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I'd told Marlene I was running to the hardware store for mounting brackets. She'd smiled and said, "Drive safe, honey," without looking up from the cabinet she and Wayne were reorganizing. Wayne, her younger brother, 48 years old, who'd shown up 2 days ago with a truck full of inventory he said he'd secured from a supplier contact, already calling himself my business partner before I'd ever offered him that title. I tried to convince myself this was a misunderstanding. Harold was cautious, precise a man who'd spent his career making sure electrical systems didn't fail. He probably just wanted to explain something about the building's wiring or show me where the main shutoff valve was located, something technical that required privacy, because he didn't want to embarrass me in front of my wife. But my hands kept shaking. At 68, you think you've learned who to trust. You think you've earned the right to stop looking over your shoulder. I'd given Marlene every access code, every bank account number, every document she'd asked for during our marriage. When she'd suggested we move into the apartment above my new store, instead of keeping our house in Round Rock, I'd agreed, because it made financial sense. When Wayne arrived talking about supplier networks and inventory purchasing, I'd nodded along because family helps family. Trust, I'd thought, was something you gave people until they proved they didn't deserve it. I turned onto Oakmont Street and saw Harold's rental, a small, tidy house with trimmed hedges and a concrete driveway. The kind of home a careful man keeps when he's spent his whole life being precise about things that matter. I parked at the curb and sat there for a moment, my engine ticking as it cooled. If I'm wrong, I thought, I'll apologize to him and drive back. Maybe he'd misunderstood something. Maybe the footage showed a repair issue or a previous tenant or nothing that concerned me at all. I got out of the car and walked up the driveway. Harold opened the door before I could knock. His face was somber, the kind of expression that tells you this isn't a misunderstanding. This is the moment when everything you thought you knew gets rewritten. "Come in," he said quietly. I stepped inside. His laptop sat open on the kitchen table, a video paused on the screen. I could see the timestamp, November 14th, 2023. 3 weeks before he'd handed me those keys. 3 weeks before Marlene had smiled in her blue dress and called it our new beginning. I thought, if I'm wrong, I'll apologize and leave. But I wasn't wrong. Harold gestured to the kitchen table where 2 coffee cups sat steaming beside his laptop. The screen was dark, but I could see the file icon, a video paused, waiting. "Sit down, Mr. Travers," he said. I sat. Harold settled across from me, hands folded the way a man folds them when he's about to deliver bad news he wishes he didn't have to deliver. "I'm not a man who goes looking for other people's business," he began. "I built that camera system myself years ago, mostly for peace of mind. When I leased the building to you, I disconnected everything. Or I thought I did." He tapped a key, and the screen brightened. An overhead angle of a living room I recognized immediately, the apartment above my store. The sofa I'd bought last month. The coffee table Marlene had chosen. "There was one camera I missed," Harold continued. "Behind the bookshelf in the upstairs living area, wired to an outlet I forgot about. I only found out it was still active because my cloud storage sent a notification it was full. I went to delete it and..." He paused. "I watched some of it." "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Harold looked at me with those steady eyes. "A previous tenant at this location lost their business to a partner who defrauded them. I did nothing to stop it then. I won't make that mistake twice." He turned the laptop toward me. "This is from Saturday, December 2nd, 4 days ago. 2 days before I handed you those keys." He pressed play. The footage was grainy but clear. High-angle view, black and white. Harold adjusted the volume, and I heard my wife's voice fill his quiet kitchen. Marlene sat on our sofa beside Wayne. Wayne's laptop was open on the coffee table, some document visible on the screen. He has never read a contract in his life. Marlene said, her voice light, almost amused. He just signs. Wayne laughed. Exactly. We don't need to do anything drastic. Just patient. I sat frozen hands flat on Harold's table. I'd spent 40 years learning to read machinery, the sound of a compressor about to fail, the smell of refrigerant leaking where it shouldn't. I should have learned to read people with the same precision. Harold looked at me. I looked back. Neither of us spoke. I nodded once, keep playing. Wayne leaned forward, tapping his laptop screen. The management agreement is clean. Once the store opens and he's buried in the day-to-day, you present it as help with the paperwork burden. He'll think it's just an internal family matter. And it gives me what? Marlene asked. Full operational control, Wayne said. Purchasing authority, vendor contracts, bank access. Everything except the title itself. By the time he figures it out, everything will be done. Marlene nodded slowly. I know him. He trusts me. That's why this works, Wayne said. The timestamp read 8:47 p.m. Saturday night, 2 days before Harold had handed me those keys. 2 days before Marlene had stood beside me in her blue dress, calling it our new beginning. Harold paused the video. There's more. About 6 minutes total. They talk about timing, which suppliers to approach, first how to structure it, so you won't notice until it's irreversible. Play it, I said. He played the rest. I watched my wife and her brother plan the dismantling of everything I'd built with the same casual efficiency most people use to plan a dinner party. Wayne mentioned a lawyer they'd consulted. Marlene talked about which assets to prioritize. At one point she laughed and said, 40 years of work and he's handing it to us in under 40 days. When the video ended, Harold closed the laptop and slid a small USB drive across the table. I copied everything onto this, he said. Every angle, every timestamp. The last tenant here had nothing in his hands when his partner took everything. You have everything. I picked up the drive. Small, black, no bigger than my thumb. Inside it was my wife's voice saying she knew I trusted her. Inside it was the blueprint for my own destruction. Thank you, I said. What are you going to do? Harold asked. I thought about that. 40 years fixing industrial refrigeration had taught me something. When a machine breaks down, you don't attack it with a sledgehammer. You trace the line from symptom to source. You find the single point of failure. You fix it with surgical precision. Nothing, I said. Not yet. Harold's eyebrows rose. You're not going to confront her. If I confront her now, she'll know I know. She'll adjust, maybe abandon it entirely, and grab what she can before I can stop her. I turned the USB drive over in my fingers. But if I let her think everything is proceeding exactly as planned. I didn't finish. I didn't need to. Harold had been an engineer. He understood systems, understood that the best time to stop a failing mechanism was after you'd identified every weak point. You're going to let her present this management agreement, he said slowly. I'm going to let her think I'm the same man who never reads contracts, I said. And while she's thinking that I'm going to build something she won't see coming, Harold nodded. If you need anything, documentation, testimony, building records, you call me. I will. I stood. The coffee had gone cold. I slipped the USB drive into my coat pocket and shook Harold's hand. Thank you, I said, for not deleting it. A man shouldn't lose what he built to people who never earned it, Harold said. Not twice in the same building. I drove home through the Texas dark with the USB drive in my coat pocket and something cold settling into my chest. Not rage, not yet, but the methodical calm I'd learned across 4 decades of diagnosing machines that had been built to deceive. When I smiled, thinking about walking back into that apartment, I knew it was a smile my wife would never understand the meaning of. Not until it was far too late. I walked into the apartment at 6:15 and found Marlene cooking dinner. The smell hit me first, garlic butter, something with chicken. She turned from the stove with that smile I'd woken up to for 5 years. "Oh, where were you, honey?" she asked. I tried calling. The lie came easier than it should have. Harold called with a question about the electrical panel. Wanted to make sure I knew where the main shutoff was. She nodded, already turning back to the stove. That man is so thorough. Dinner's almost ready. The USB drive sat in my coat pocket. Her voice kept playing in my head. I know him. He trusts me. She'd said it so casually, the way you'd mention the weather. No malice, no cruelty, just a simple fact she was leveraging to take everything I'd spent 40 years building. My first wife, Margaret, died of cancer 8 years ago. I held her hand through 6 months of chemo, watched her fade from 130 pounds to 90, buried her with the ring I'd saved 3 years to buy. I thought I knew what grief felt like. I was wrong. That grief had been clean, terrible, but clean. Margaret never chose to leave me. Cancer chose for her. This was different. This was watching someone I'd trusted with my bank accounts, my business plans, my late-night fears, watching her plot my destruction with the same hands that had held mine at Margaret's funeral. I'd met Marlene 2 years after Margaret died. I was 63, still lost, eating frozen dinners alone in a house that felt too big. She was 40, working at the hardware supply where I bought parts. She'd remembered my name after the second visit. By the fourth, she was suggesting better products. When she'd agreed to dinner, I'd felt like a miracle had happened. When she'd married me a year later, I thought I'd been given a second chance at happiness that most men my age never got. 5 years. How many of those days had she been planning this? I hung my coat in the closet, the USB drive secure in the inside pocket. When I turned around, Marlene was setting the table, 2 plates, cloth napkins, the good glasses. "Wayne's coming by tomorrow," she said. "He's got some supplier contacts he wants to discuss. I thought maybe the 3 of us could have lunch and go over inventory planning." "Sounds good," I said. The words tasted like metal. She smiled. "It's so exciting, isn't it, our store? Our new life together." "It is," I said. We sat down to dinner. She'd made chicken piccata, something she knew I loved. She asked about my day, about the parts catalog system. I answered. I asked about her afternoon, about paint samples for the bathroom. She answered. A normal married couple conversation, the kind we'd had 1,000 times before. Except now I was watching her like a stranger. The way she tilted her head when she asked questions, genuine interest or practiced performance. The way she touched my hand when she laughed. Had that ever meant what I thought it meant? Have you ever had to walk into your own home and pretend your heart wasn't broken? To sit across a dinner table from someone you loved and see a stranger wearing her face? The chicken was perfectly cooked. I told her so. She beamed. After dinner, I washed the dishes. She dried. We moved around the kitchen in the easy choreography of 5 years' practice. My hands were in the warm, soapy water when she mentioned the management agreement. "Not by name, not yet. I was thinking," she said, putting away a plate. "Once we're open and you're dealing with customers all day, you're going to need help with the paperwork side. Invoices, vendor contracts, all that administrative stuff." I kept scrubbing a pot. "I suppose so. Wayne and I were talking. He's got business management experience. Maybe we could set up some kind of arrangement where he helps handle that side of things. Take the burden off you so you can focus on the technical work." My hands stilled in the water for just a second. Then I kept scrubbing. "That's thoughtful," I said. "Let's talk about it after we've been open a few weeks. See what the actual workload looks like." "Of course," she said easily. "No rush. I just want to make sure you're not overwhelmed." She came up behind me and rested her hand on my shoulder. Through the kitchen window, I could see the yellow lights of my storefront reflecting off the glass below. Every shelf, every part, every piece of inventory, 40 years of my life sitting in that space. "Oh, we're so lucky," she murmured. To have this. To have each other. I didn't pull away. I stood very still, my hands in the warm dishwater, and felt something cold settle deep in my chest, where love used to live. She was good at this. Better than I'd ever imagined. She'd spent 5 years building my trust, learning exactly how to talk to me, exactly which moments to touch my hand or rest her head on my shoulder. Every gesture calculated, every word measured. But here was what she didn't know. I'd spent 40 years learning to diagnose systems designed to hide their failures. I'd learned patience. I'd learned to watch and wait and document every symptom before making a move. If she could perform love for 5 years, I could perform trust for 5 weeks. I dried my hands and turned to face her. I'm tired. Think I'll turn in early. She kissed my cheek. I'll be up soon. I just want to finish planning tomorrow's inventory list for when Wayne comes. Good night, I said. I walked into the bedroom and closed the door. Through the wall, I could hear her moving in the kitchen, humming softly to herself. Planning. I took the USB drive from my coat pocket and held it in my palm. Smaller than a house key. Lighter than a wedding ring. I stood very still and I began to plan. The next morning, I started watching my wife the way I used to watch refrigeration systems, for the first signs of failure, carefully, methodically looking for the patterns I'd been too trusting to notice before. Thursday morning, 8:30. I was downstairs in the store arranging the front display when I heard Marlene's car door open in the parking lot. Through the window, I watched her go straight to our mailbox, pull out a stack of envelopes, and sort through them in her car before coming inside. She walked through the door holding 2 envelopes. Just a few bills today, honey. Nothing important. I took them, supplier catalogs addressed to me. Thanks. She kissed my cheek and headed back upstairs. Through the window, I saw her car door still open. She'd left something inside. That evening, after she went to bed, I checked the trash. The 3rd envelope was there, opened carefully, the return address from a commercial parts distributor I'd been planning to contact. Inside was an order confirmation, $3,000 of refrigeration components delivery scheduled for next week. The billing name, M. Dalton Enterprises, LLC. I stood in our kitchen at 11 p.m. holding that paper under the dim stove light, reading it 3 times to make sure I understood. Marlene Dalton. Her maiden name. She'd registered this company when before we were married. Right after, she was ordering inventory for my store under her own LLC, not mine. I photographed the document with my phone, replaced it exactly as I'd found it in the trash, and went to bed. Marlene was sleeping peacefully, one hand tucked under her pillow, the way she always did. I lay awake thinking about systems. In 40 years of fixing refrigeration, I'd learned that the worst failures aren't the sudden ones. They're the slow leaks, the ones draining the system for months, before anyone notices the compressor is running dry. Friday afternoon, Tom Radford walked through my door. Tom was a parts supplier I'd known for 20-plus years, through refrigeration trade associations, 60 years old, built like someone who'd spent his youth hauling compressor units before moving into sales with gray hair and the kind of handshake that came from decades of sealing deals on trust. He carried a supply catalog and wore the comfortable smile of someone visiting an old friend. "Eugene," he said, shaking my hand. "Place looks great. You finally did it." "Finally," I agreed. "What brings you by?" He set the catalog on my counter. "Wanted to talk about your standing order for spring. I've got volume discounts if you commit by year end." He paused, flipping through pages. "Also wanted to confirm something. Heard from Mrs. Travers that the store will be in her name soon. Just wanted to make sure, who am I signing this supply contract with?" I kept my face perfectly still. "Still signing with me, Tom." Marlene's excited about the business, tends to get ahead of herself sometimes. Tom laughed, easy and unconcerned. "Ah, understood. My wife's the same way when I talk about expanding the warehouse. Gets 3 steps ahead before I've finished step 1. He pulled out a contract. So, standard terms, net 30 minimum monthly order delivery every other Tuesday work for you. We went through the paperwork. My hands were steady signing my name. My voice was steady discussing delivery schedules. When Tom left 20 minutes later, he was satisfied the contract was signed, and he had no idea that the ground beneath my store had just shifted again. I stood at the counter after he drove away, thinking about what he'd said. Heard from Mrs. Travers. She'd called him, told him the store would be in her name soon. How many others had she called? How many other suppliers, contractors, service providers had she contacted to tell them the same story, that I was happily handing over my life's work to my devoted wife? The conspiracy wasn't just something she and Wayne discussed in secret. It was something she was actively executing publicly in my community, while I organized shelves and planned a grand opening that she'd already convinced half of Georgetown would be hers. I turned and picked up a washer from the shelf behind me. Simple steel, part 3/4 of an inch, the kind I'd replaced 10,000 times across 40 years. I rolled it between my fingers, feeling the cool metal, the perfect circular precision of something manufactured to exact specifications. This washer, this simple piece of hardware, I could tell you which systems it fit, which manufacturers specified it, what torque to apply when installing it, and exactly how long it would last under normal operating conditions. 40 years of that knowledge. 40 years of learning every component, every system, every failure mode. 40 years of savings to buy this store stock, these shelves, build this dream. And Marlene had been telling suppliers it was hers before I'd even opened the doors. Not planning to take it, not preparing to steal it, acting as if she'd already won. As if the management agreement Wayne mentioned on that video was a formality, not a theft. As if my signature on their paperwork was inevitable. She'd sold my store before I had a chance to open it, but she hadn't signed the papers yet. I stood there in my quiet store, late Friday afternoon, December light, coming through the windows at that low angle that makes everything look both beautiful and fragile. The shelves I'd installed myself, the catalog system I'd spent 3 weeks building, the parts I'd chosen because I knew after 40 years I knew exactly what contractors in this area would need. Mine. I put the washer back on its shelf exactly where it belonged. Through the window, I could see Marlene's car pulling into the parking lot. She'd be coming down in a minute to ask about dinner, to smile at me, to touch my shoulder, and call this our store. While her LLC took delivery of $3,000 of inventory in her maiden name. I thought she sold my store before I opened the doors. But she hasn't signed the papers yet. And I still have time to make sure she never will. The door chimed. Marlene walked in smiling. "How was your day, honey?" she asked. "Productive," I said. "Very productive." That Friday night, long after Marlene had gone upstairs to sleep, I sat alone at the desk behind my store counter with a single lamp burning, and became someone I'd never been before. A man building a legal case against his own wife. The rest of the store was dark. Outside, Georgetown slept. Inside, I opened my laptop and started with what any good technician does when diagnosing a failing system: documentation. I created a new email account first. Not my name, nothing Marlene would recognize if she somehow found it. R. Morrison. My mother's maiden name, Rebecca Morrison, dead 15 years. No connection to anything in my current life. The password was a parts catalog number from 1987, something only I would remember. r.morrison.archive@gmail.com. Then I started photographing everything. The lease agreement. My business registration with the Texas Secretary of State showing sole proprietorship. Every inventory receipt showing my name as purchaser. The supplier order confirmation I'd found in the trash with M. Dalton Enterprises on the billing line. The emails from suppliers mentioning Marlene's calls. Harold's USB drive contents. I uploaded the whole video to cloud storage through the hidden account. Every photograph, Every document I forwarded to that email address. Building a record she couldn't delete, couldn't find, couldn't destroy if this went the way Harold's previous tenant's case had gone. Then I started researching. Business Management Agreement, Texas. The search results came back with legal templates, law firm articles, business structuring guides. I clicked through them methodically, the way I used to read compressor maintenance manuals, looking for the details that mattered, the fine print that changed everything. A business management agreement, I learned, was a legal instrument that transferred operational control of a business from owner to manager. In Texas, if signed voluntarily, it didn't require notarization, didn't require witnesses, just 2 signatures on a page, which meant Marlene and Wayne could present it to me at the kitchen table, make it sound like helpful family paperwork, and have me sign away operational control without anyone present to testify later that I'd been deceived about what it meant. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. Reading contract law at midnight felt like the old days diagnosing a failing compressor. You had to understand the whole system to see where the single point of failure would bring it all down. The management agreement was their entry point. Once they had operational control, they could execute contracts, establish vendor relationships, make financial decisions. And once those were in place, challenging ownership became infinitely more complicated. I'd read complex electrical schematics my whole life. Commercial contracts weren't much more complicated if you knew what you were looking for. Saturday morning, Marlene went out shopping. Said she was buying kitchen supplies for the apartment, would be gone a few hours. The moment her car pulled out of the parking lot, I was back at the laptop. Texas Secretary of State. Business entity search. I typed her name, Marlene Dalton. One result, M. Dalton Enterprises, LLC. Registered October 20th, 2023. I stared at that date. October 20th. I knew that date. I opened the calendar on my phone and scrolled back. October 20th, 2023. Saturday. The day Harold first showed us the building. I remember that morning clearly. Harold had called the night before, said he had a commercial property that might interest me, asked if I wanted to see it. We'd driven over together, Marlene and I, excited about the possibility. Harold had unlocked the door and shown us the empty storefront, fresh paint, still drying windows, gleaming perfect square footage. I'd walked through that space, imagining where I'd put the parts shelves, where the counter would go, how I'd organize the inventory. This was it, I'd thought. This was what 40 years of work had been building toward. Marlene had stayed in the corner on her phone. I'd asked if everything was okay. She'd smiled and said, "Just texting Wayne about something. This place is perfect, honey." She'd been registering the company. While I stood in that empty storefront, imagining where I'd put the compressor parts and refrigerant tanks, she was sitting in the car, registering a company designed to take it all away. Not a crime of opportunity. Not something she and Wayne had cooked up after I'd signed the lease. This had been planned from the first moment she saw the building. Maybe before. Maybe she'd encouraged me to start looking for a storefront specifically for this. I took a screenshot of the LLC registration, forwarded it to the hidden email, saved it 3 different ways. Then I sat there staring at the screen, processing the timeline. October 20th, LLC registered. November 15th, lease negotiations began. December 2nd, Harold's footage showed them discussing the management agreement. December 4th, I signed the lease and got the keys. December 6th, Harold warned me. 6 weeks of preparation. 6 weeks of setting up supplier relationships, establishing her LLC, coordinating with Wayne, probably consulting the lawyer they'd mentioned in the video. All while she cooked my dinners, kissed me goodnight, and told me how proud she was that I was finally pursuing my dream. 5 years of marriage. Was any of it real, or was it all just the setup for this moment, the patient construction of trust she could leverage the instant I had something worth taking? I heard her car pull into the parking lot. Closed the laptop immediately. By the time she walked through the door with shopping bags, I was at the front counter organizing gasket inventory like I'd been there all morning. "How's it going, honey?" she called. "Good," I said, making progress. She smiled and headed upstairs with her bags. That night, after she was asleep, I sat in the dark store, staring at the shelves I'd installed myself. LLC registration date, October 20th, 2023. The exact day we came to look at the building for the first time. She knew what she wanted before I even had a chance to like the place. Harold's footage showed 6 minutes of conversation from December 2nd. Tom Radford had confirmed she was contacting suppliers publicly. The LLC proved premeditation going back 6 weeks. But if she'd been planning this that carefully, that long, what else had she prepared that I hadn't found yet? I needed more than documents. I needed their words. I needed evidence of the conspiracy itself, recorded, preserved, undeniable. I opened the laptop again and started searching for something I never thought I'd need: how to legally record conversations in Texas. Monday morning, I ordered a voice recorder online with next-day delivery, paid extra for it to arrive at the store instead of our apartment. And by evening, I was cooking dinner for my wife and her brother with the device running silently in my apron pocket. Texas is a one-party consent state. I'd learned that Sunday night reading law forums at 2 in the morning. As long as one person in a conversation knows it's being recorded, it's legal. The small black recorder sat against my hip, no bigger than a deck of cards, a red light glowing through the fabric where no one would see it. Wayne arrived at 6:30 with a bottle of wine, acting like family helping family. "Smells great," he said. "What are we having?" "Chicken marsala," I said. Marlene's favorite. She came out freshly dressed, kissed her brother's cheek, kissed mine. We sat down to dinner like a normal family. I poured wine. We talked about the weather, about holiday plans, about whether the store would be ready before Christmas. Then Wayne shifted the conversation. "Actually," he said, setting down his fork, "that's something Marlene and I wanted to talk to you about. The administrative side of running the business." I kept my face neutral. "What about it?" We've been putting together a management agreement. Simple stuff where Marlene can handle the day-to-day paperwork, invoices, contracts, vendor relationships. Save you the stress, Eugene. You can focus on the technical work." Marlene touched my hand. "You've always hated dealing with contracts and forms, honey. This just makes things easier." I nodded slowly, like I was considering it. "What kind of paperwork are we talking about?" "Shaktina, standard business management stuff," Wayne said easily. "Purchasing authority, vendor contracts, banking relationships. We've already talked to a few suppliers about the transition. They're on board. Nothing you need to worry about. Already talked to suppliers. Past tense. The conspiracy wasn't coming, it was happening, executing, while I sat here cooking them dinner. They were so confident, so comfortable, that they didn't even bother with coded language. They spoke about stealing my store the way you'd discuss remodeling a kitchen, practical, inevitable, already decided. "Sounds reasonable," I said. "When would we need to finalize something like that?" No rush," Marlene said quickly. "After the holidays, maybe. We just wanted to plant the seed so you could think about it." "I appreciate that," I said. "Let me think on it." Wayne raised his glass. "To family businesses." We drank. The recorder captured every word, every casual mention of transition and management and authority. Every lie wrapped in family loyalty. After Wayne left, I washed dishes while Marlene dried. The recorder stayed in my apron until I could get downstairs and upload the audio to the hidden email account. Tuesday morning, I drove to the bank to deposit cash receipts. I walked into the lobby and stopped. Through the glass partition of a loan officer's office, I saw Wayne, sitting across the desk, laptop open, pointing at the screen, at my bank. The bank where I'd opened my business account 3 weeks ago. I stood there for 10 seconds watching. Then I walked to the teller window and completed my deposit mechanically. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Travers?" the teller asked. "More times." Can you verify who has signing authority on my business account? She typed something. Currently showing only Eugene Travers as authorized signer. Currently. Currently, I repeated. Can anyone else make changes to that without me? No, sir, only you can add or remove signers. Is there a concern? Just confirming, thank you. I walked out to my car and sat in the parking lot watching Wayne through the glass. He was still in there, talking, gesturing. After 10 minutes, he stood up, shook her hand, walked out, looking satisfied. I sat very still, replaying the teller's words. Currently showing only Eugene Travers. Not only you, or just you. Currently. As if that status were temporary. As if she'd been briefed on a change that was coming. How long had Wayne been visiting my bank, laying groundwork with loan officers? How many other institutions had he approached, building the infrastructure to take over before the management agreement was even signed? Harold's footage showed them planning. Tom Radford confirmed they were contacting suppliers. The LLC proved 6 weeks of premeditation. And now Wayne was sitting in my own bank, preparing the financial architecture of my destruction. They weren't preparing to steal my store anymore. They were executing the theft, in real time, one institution at a time, building the framework so that the moment I signed that management agreement, everything would already be in place. The paperwork would just formalize what they'd already accomplished. I drove back to the store. Marlene was upstairs humming while she cooked lunch. I could smell it through the vents, something with onions, something that meant she was in a good mood. I sat at the desk behind the counter and thought about that word. Currently, the bank teller had said it like a status report, not a permanent condition. Currently only you, as if next week it might be different. As if the change was already scheduled, and she was just waiting for paperwork to make it official. I opened the laptop and pulled up the hidden email account. Last night's recording was there, backed up in 3 locations. Wayne's voice saying they'd already talked to suppliers. Marlene's voice saying I'd always hated contracts. Evidence of conspiracy. Evidence of intent. Evidence of execution. But not evidence of the actual documents. Not the management agreement itself. Not the bank forms Wayne was preparing, not whatever else they'd drawn up with their lawyer. I needed to find those papers before they presented them. Before the moment when refusing to sign would reveal I knew would trigger whatever backup plan they'd prepared for resistance. I closed the laptop and looked up at the ceiling where Marlene was still humming in our kitchen. Currently, I thought. That word meant I was running out of time. Wednesday afternoon, I found the family tablet on the kitchen counter, still logged into Marlene's email, and in 3 minutes of scrolling, I learned exactly how they planned to forge my signature and transfer my lease to a company I'd never heard of. She'd gone out shopping. The tablet sat on the counter beside her coffee cup, screen dark but unlocked. I picked it up, opened the mail app, and started reading. The thread was labeled Lease Assignment, Travers Property. The sender was Caldwell and Associates, a business law firm in Austin. The earliest message was dated November 22nd, 3 weeks ago. I scrolled through the exchanges. Legal terminology, document preparation, filing requirements. Then I reached the most recent email sent yesterday. Documents prepared and ready. Waiting for scanned signature from Mr. Eugene Travers to complete assignment to M. Dalton Enterprises, LLC. Once received, we can file with landlord Harold Prescott and county records. Timeline estimated 3 to 5 business days after receipt of signature. Marlene's response sent last night. Working on that. He'll sign soon. Will forward within the week. Scanned signature. Not I'll have him sign. Not he'll sign the documents. Scanned signature. As if she already had it. As if she'd extract it from another document I'd signed, the lease maybe, or the business registration, and paste it onto the lease assignment without me ever seeing the paperwork. I'd spent 40 years learning to read technical manuals, wiring diagrams, pressure charts. Now I was reading my wife's emails like a detective, and every line felt like another nail in the coffin of my marriage. I took screenshots of every email in the thread, forwarded them to the hidden account, deleted the forwarded messages from her sent folder, put the tablet back exactly where I'd found it, screen dark beside her coffee cup. 10 minutes later, I heard her car pull into the parking lot. By the time she walked through the door with shopping bags, I was downstairs organizing inventory. "How's it going, honey?" she called from the top of the stairs. "Good," I said, making progress. Thursday evening after dinner, Marlene gestured to a manila folder sitting on the table. "Wayne and I put this together," she said, opening it. "We know how much you hate paperwork." Inside was a document with professional legal letterhead, Business Management Agreement. The text was dense, formatted in the standard style of legal contracts. Numbered sections, subsections defined terms in capital letters. She flipped through the pages, pointing at sections as she explained. "This lets me handle the administrative side vendor agreements, permits banking relationships, leaves you free to focus on what you're good at. The technical work, the customer service." I looked down at the pages. Section 2, Operational Control. Section 3, Signatory Authority. Section 5, Banking and Financial Management. Signature lines at the bottom for both of us. This is thorough," I said slowly. "Let me read through it carefully when I have a quiet evening. I like to understand what I'm signing." Her jaw tightened for just a fraction of a second. Then she smiled. "Of course, honey. No rush. Take your time." She kissed the top of my head and went back to the kitchen. I heard her start washing dishes, humming that song she always hummed when she was in a good mood. I sat alone at the table, the folder open before me, processing what had just happened. Have you ever had to smile at someone who was handing you the instrument of your own destruction, to say thank you for the knife they were planning to slide between your ribs? "No rush," she'd said. But there was a rush. I could feel it in the air between us, in the careful way she'd presented the folder in that moment, when her jaw had tightened before she'd forced the smile. The law firm was waiting for a scanned signature. Wayne had been positioning himself at my bank. Suppliers already believed the story that the store was transitioning to Marlene's control. The LLC had been registered since October. Every piece was in place, every relationship established, every institution prepared. They just needed my signature on this document to make it official, and they needed it soon, before I discovered too much, before I asked too many questions, before the store actually opened and started generating revenue they'd have to account for. Before Christmas, probably some arbitrary deadline they'd set, some timeline where everything had to be locked in place. Every day I delayed was another day they grew more nervous. Another day their careful plans sat incomplete, vulnerable to discovery, dependent on my continued ignorance. The pressure wasn't on me, it was on them. I'd been thinking about this wrong. I'd been worried about running out of time, about them executing their plan before I could stop it. But they couldn't execute anything without this signature. And the longer I held it back, the more desperate they'd become, the more mistakes they'd make. I looked down at the folder. Dense legal language designed to intimidate, to make me sign without reading carefully. Operational control, signatory authority, banking access. Everything wrapped in helpful language about reducing my stress and letting me focus on what I was good at. I closed the folder and set it aside. Marlene came back into the dining room, drying her hands on a towel. "All done," she said cheerfully. "Want to watch a movie tonight?" "Sure," I said. "Sounds good." We sat on the couch together. I put my arm around her shoulders the way I had 1,000 times before. We watched some comedy she'd picked, and I laughed in the right places, and when she rested her head against my chest, I didn't pull away. But the whole time I was thinking about that folder on the dining room table, about the law firm waiting for a signature, about Wayne's timeline at the bank, about the word currently the teller had used. Marlene had said no rush, but there was a rush. I could feel the pressure in every casual word, every reassuring smile. They needed this signed soon, before Christmas, before I had time to think too carefully or ask too many questions, which meant I had more power than they knew. I just needed to figure out exactly how to use it. At 2 in the morning, while my wife slept in the room above my store, I sat at the kitchen table under a single dim bulb and read every word of the document designed to take everything I'd built across 40 years. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and Marlene's breathing audible through the bedroom door. I opened the manila folder and spread the pages across the table. Business Management Agreement, professional letterhead. 12 pages, single-spaced, dense legal language in small font designed to intimidate anyone without a law degree. I started reading. Page 1 was preamble standard language about the parties entering into agreement recitals about the purpose and intent. It sounded innocuous, helpful even. Language about reducing administrative burden, streamlining operations, allowing owner to focus on technical expertise. Page 2 was where the definitions began. Owner Eugene Travers, that was me. Manager Marlene Travers, that was her. Business Travers Appliance Parts Sole Proprietorship, Georgetown, Texas. Then the actual grant of authority. Manager shall have full authority to execute contracts on behalf of the business, including but not limited to vendor agreements, supply contracts, employment agreements, and lease modifications. Manager shall have signatory power over all business accounts and financial instruments. Manager may designate sub-managers with equivalent authority at manager's sole discretion. I read that paragraph 3 times. Lease modifications. She could change the lease, transfer it, assign it, modify its terms without my consent. The Austin law firm didn't need my scanned signature. They just needed this document showing she had authority to execute the lease assignment on my behalf. Designate sub-managers. That meant Wayne, or anyone else she chose. She could give Wayne full authority over my business, my accounts, my contracts just by designating him. I kept reading. Page 3. Detailed financial authority. Manager controls all banking relationships, can open or close accounts, transfer funds, execute loans, pledge assets as collateral. Owner retains title, but manager controls every transaction. Reading this felt like watching someone dismantle a refrigeration system bolt by bolt, except the system was my life, and they were selling the parts while I still owned the compressor. Page 4 covered vendor relationships. Manager has exclusive authority to negotiate, execute, and terminate supplier contracts. Owner cannot override manager's decisions regarding procurement or inventory. Page 5 was dispute resolution. Any disagreement between owner and manager shall be resolved through binding arbitration, not court proceedings. Arbitration to be conducted in Travis County, fees split equally between parties. Binding arbitration. More expensive than court. Slower. Favored whoever had deeper pockets and more patience. By the time I could challenge anything through arbitration, they'd have controlled the business for months, maybe years. Then I reached page 6, the term section. And this agreement shall remain in effect indefinitely from the date of execution. Termination may only occur by mutual written consent of both parties. I stopped reading, looked at that sentence for a long time. Mutual written consent. I couldn't end this agreement unilaterally. Even if I discovered it was theft, which I already had. Even if I wanted to fire Marlene as manager, which I desperately did. I would need her written consent to terminate the agreement. She would never give it. This wasn't a management agreement. It was a cage. Once I signed this, Marlene controlled every aspect of my business forever, or until she decided to let me out, which meant never. She could bring Wayne in as sub-manager. She could transfer the lease to her LLC using the lease modification authority. She could drain the business accounts, take out loans against my inventory, sign exclusive vendor contracts with suppliers who'd pay her kickbacks, all completely legal under this agreement. And I couldn't stop her, couldn't terminate the agreement, couldn't override her decisions, could only file for arbitration that would take years and cost more than the business was worth. 40 years I'd fixed machines, diagnosed failures, prevented disasters, and now I was looking at the blueprint of my own destruction, written in legal language designed to sound helpful. I read the agreement again, slower this time, searching for loopholes, escape clauses, anything that might protect me once I'd signed. There was nothing. Every clause interlocked with the next, like a refrigeration system, except this one was designed to fail, not to work. Whoever drafted this knew exactly what they were doing. Probably the same Austin firm that was waiting for my scanned signature on the lease assignment. Page 12 was the signature page. Eugene Travers, owner. Blank line. Marlene Travers, manager. Blank line. Notary public. Blank line. No witnesses required. Just 2 signatures and a notary stamp to make it official, to make it legal, to make it permanent. I closed the folder and sat very still. The kitchen was quiet. Through the window, I could see the parking lot lights reflecting off the pavement. My store was downstairs, dark, full of inventory I'd chosen, and shelves I'd installed and dreams I'd spent 40 years building toward. And upstairs, my wife was sleeping peacefully, believing I was too trusting, too ignorant, too old to understand what this document really meant. She'd said no rush, said take your time, said she just wanted to help me with the paperwork burden. Every word a lie wrapped in concern. I looked down at the folder again. This was the trap, the mechanism, the single point of failure that would bring down everything I'd built. But here was what Marlene didn't understand. I'd spent 40 years diagnosing complex systems, learning how they worked so I could fix them when they broke, understanding every component, every connection, every failure mode. She'd shown me the blueprint thinking I wouldn't comprehend it, thinking I'd see dense legal language and sign it just to make the paperwork go away, the way I supposedly did with every contract. But I understood it completely now. Every clause, every term, every mechanism by which this document would destroy me, which meant I knew exactly how to avoid it. They'd built a perfect trap. Professionally drafted, legally airtight, every escape route sealed. But it only worked if I stepped into it. I sat alone in the kitchen at 2:45 a.m., reading the final clause for the 3rd time. Then I smiled. Not out of joy, there was no joy in any of this, but because I finally knew exactly what I was dealing with, and I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I needed help. A lawyer who understood Texas commercial law. Someone who could build a legal fortress around my business before Marlene and Wayne made their final move. I closed the folder and put it back exactly where Marlene had left it, as if I'd barely glanced at it. Tomorrow I'd tell her I was still reading it, still thinking about it. Buying time. Tonight I knew they'd already lost. They just didn't know it yet. Friday morning, I sat in a coffee shop parking lot 15 miles from Georgetown. Phone brightness turned down, searching for a commercial lawyer who understood the kind of theft that doesn't require breaking and entering. I'd driven to Round Rock before sunrise, told Marlene I was meeting a supplier about bulk inventory pricing. She'd kissed my cheek and said, "Don't let them talk you into anything expensive, honey." The irony tasted like metal. I searched on my phone, Texas commercial lawyer business fraud. UCC filing attorney Georgetown. Attorney partner theft prevention. Most results were large firms in Austin with websites full of corporate photos and partnership bios. Too visible, too expensive, too likely that Marlene would hear about it through some business network connection. Then I found Vernon Lancaster, small practice office address above a dry cleaner on Main Street. The reviews mentioned discreet, thorough. Saved my business from a partner who was stealing. No fancy website, just a phone number and address. I called at 9 a.m. Lancaster Law, a voice answered. Not a receptionist, him directly. "Mr. Lancaster, my name is Eugene Travers. I need to speak with you about business protection. It's urgent." "What kind of business?" "The appliance parts. Sole proprietorship. My wife and her brother are positioning to take operational control through a management agreement. I have documentation. Silence for 3 seconds. Then, can you come at 2 p.m. today? Yes. Bring everything you have. Physical copies if possible, digital backup if not. He gave me the address and hung up. I sat in that parking lot for an hour just breathing. For the first time since Harold's phone call 9 days ago, I was about to share the full weight of what I'd discovered. The relief of not carrying it alone was almost overwhelming. I killed time driving back roads, sitting in a park, watching joggers rehearsing what I'd say. By 1:30, I was parked on Main Street looking up at the narrow stairs beside the dry cleaner. Small office above a dry cleaner. Not flashy, not about show. I liked that. At exactly 2 p.m. I climbed those stairs. The office was small, maybe 400 square feet. One desk, 2 filing cabinets, a conference table that looked like it had come from a government surplus sale. The man behind the desk stood when I entered. Vernon Lancaster, maybe 55 with gray at the temples, practiced commercial law from a small office above a dry cleaner. Nothing about him designed to impress, which was exactly why I trusted him. He wore a blue shirt, with the sleeves rolled up, reading glasses on a chain around his neck, and his handshake was firm without being aggressive. "Mr. Travers," he said. "Sit down. Tell me what's happening." I sat, opened my bag. "My wife and her brother are trying to steal my business. I have evidence. Show me." I laid everything on his desk. The USB drive with Harold's footage, printed screenshots of Marlene's emails with the Austin law firm, the LLC registration showing October 20th, supplier documents showing M. Dalton Enterprises, the management agreement, my phone with the dinner recording. Vernon picked up the USB drive first. "What's on this?" "Security camera footage from December 2nd. My wife and her brother discussing the plan. 6 minutes. My landlord recorded it accidentally. He plugged it into his laptop." I watched him watch the footage. His face showed nothing, no shock, no judgment, no emotion at all. Just professional attention, taking notes on a legal pad in careful handwriting. When it ended, he read the email screenshots. Then the LLC documents. Then the full management agreement page by page. It took 10 minutes. I sat quietly and waited. Have you ever watched someone read the story of your life falling apart and seen nothing in their face but professional calculation? It was the most comforting thing I'd experienced in days. Finally, Vernon set down the agreement and looked at me. "This isn't a routine management agreement," he said. "The power of attorney clause, the indefinite term, the arbitration requirement, the designee's provision combined with the lease assignment preparation and your brother-in-law positioning at your bank. This is a 3-layer encirclement. Is it legal? On its face, yes. That's what makes it dangerous. The law assumes you understood what you signed. Once your signature is on this document, proving duress or fraud becomes exponentially harder." He tapped the agreement. "Each piece alone is dangerous. Altogether, it's a cage. Can you stop it? Your only protection is not signing it and making sure they can't quietly force the issue another way. Not if we move quickly." He leaned back. "When did they present this to you?" "Thursday night. Told me to take my time reading it." "And you've been performing normalcy acting like you're considering it?" "For 9 days, since I first saw the security footage." Vernon's expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but something close to respect. 9 days you've been living with this knowledge and showing nothing." "I fix refrigeration systems for a living," I said. "You learn to stay calm when the pressure's building. You learn to work methodically even when things are failing." He nodded slowly. "Good. Then we accelerate from here." He pulled a fresh legal pad toward him. "I'm going to build protective filings this afternoon. UCC1 financing statements establishing your sole ownership. A corporate resolution, even though you're a sole proprietorship belt and suspenders. We'll need your landlord's cooperation for a lease writer. State Harold Prescott. He's the one who gave me the security footage. He'll help. Perfect. Vernon made notes. Here's the most important part. Let them believe they're still winning. The more comfortable they get, the more they say. The more evidence you gather. The stronger your position when this goes to confrontation. Can you maintain the performance? I've been doing it 9 days already. Vernon looked at me with quiet approval. Most important, let them believe they're still winning. More comfortable they are, more mistakes they make. Can you do that? Yes, I said. I can do that. He stood up and extended his hand again. Then let's make sure your wife and her brother learn what happens when they underestimate a man who spent 40 years understanding how systems fail. Vernon pulled out a legal pad and began sketching what he called a defensive fortress, 3 layers of protection that would turn my wife's trap into a cage of her own making. 3 defensive layers, he said, drawing boxes connected by arrows. Each blocks a different avenue of attack. He tapped the first box. UCC1 financing statement. Filed with the Texas Secretary of State against all your equipment. Establishes security interest, prevents anyone from taking loans against your assets without consent. Blocks Wayne's collateral attempt. Second box. Lease anti-assignment rider. Amendment to your lease stating it cannot be transferred without Harold's written consent. Even if Marlene's law firm tries to execute that assignment, Harold can reject it. Third box. Corporate resolution. Confirms you as sole authorized signer on all business matters. Makes it explicit that Marlene and Wayne have 0 authority. I looked at the diagram. How fast can you file these today, before close of business? Vernon checked his watch. 2:45 now. UCC1 files electronically within the hour. Corporate resolution. I'll notarize here effective immediately. Lease writer requires Harold's cooperation. Harold showed me the footage in the first place, I said. He'll agree. And then once filed, even if you signed their management agreement tomorrow, it cannot execute without passing through me and Harold first. I felt something shift in my chest. For the first time in 9 days, I could breathe fully. Before I tell you what happened when Vernon filed those protections, if you're still with me, comment A, if you think this fortress will hold, or B, if you think Marlene will discover it first. Add one short reason why you chose that. A note, some details ahead are recreated for storytelling impact. The lesson behind them is what I hope stays with you. Vernon picked up his phone and called Harold. What, Mr. Prescott, this is Vernon Lancaster. I'm Eugene Travers' attorney. I need to discuss a lease protection amendment. Harold's voice came through the speaker. Eugene hired an attorney, good. What do you need? Anti-assignment rider. Explicit language that the lease cannot be transferred without your written consent. Send it. I'll sign today. Harold's voice was firm. I've been waiting for Eugene to do something like this. Vernon drafted the amendment in 10 minutes. Sent it. Harold returned the signed PDF in 12 minutes. Then Vernon opened the Texas Secretary of State website and filed the UCC1. I watched him type detailed descriptions of every piece of equipment in my store. Compressor units, refrigerant tanks, shelving systems, point-of-sale hardware. He clicked Submit. Confirmation page, filing received. Effective immediately. 3:47 p.m. Vernon pulled out a corporate resolution form, filled in my information, signed as witness. I signed as owner. He notarized it. Done, he said. As of 3:47 p.m. today, your business is legally fortified. UCC1 is on record. Lease cannot be assigned. Your signatory authority is documented. Even if Marlene got you to sign that management agreement, it cannot transfer control without going through me and Harold simultaneously. I sat in that small office above a dry cleaner and felt the entire weight of the last 9 days shift from my shoulders to theirs. They thought they were hunting me. Had no idea the trap had just closed around them instead. What do I owe you? Say $1,500 for today's filings and consultation. He slid a retainer agreement across the desk. Most important thing, maintain your performance. Let them believe they're winning. The more comfortable they get, the more they reveal. I signed the retainer, wrote a check, shook his hand. One more thing, Vernon said. Don't sign their agreement, not even to see what happens. Once your signature is on it, complications multiply. Just keep delaying, you're reading carefully, understanding every clause. Buy time. How much time do I have? Until they panic. Until they realize you're not the trusting old man they thought. He smiled slightly. Could be days. Could be weeks. I left at 5 p.m. Drove back through December dusk. For 40 years, I'd repaired refrigeration systems, understood how every component locked together. Now I'd built a different kind of system, one designed not to cool, but to protect, and every piece was interlocking perfectly. I parked across from my store and saw Marlene inside. She was holding a tape measure, extending it wall to wall, pointing at my shelves, tilting her head like she was imagining a different configuration. Planning renovations, acting like it was already hers. I felt nothing. No anger, no grief, just cold certainty. I walked to the store. She saw me and waved, smiling. Honey, she said brightly. I was just thinking about rearranging the front display. Make it more customer-friendly. What do you think about moving the counter to the left? I looked at where she was pointing. At the tape measure in her hand. At her face, excited, completely convinced this space would soon be hers. That's thoughtful, I said. Let me know what you come up with. I'm making sketches tonight. Wayne knows a contractor who could do the work cheap. Sounds good. I went upstairs. Through the floor vent, I could hear her moving below, still measuring, still planning. I stood at the window looking down. Go ahead, I thought. Measure all you want. Plan your renovations. Sketch your layouts. Call your contractors. It will never be yours. At 3:47 p.m. this afternoon, Vernon Lancaster had filed documents that made sure of it. Marlene was downstairs imagining her future in a space legally locked against her, protected by layers of filings she didn't know existed. She thought she was preparing for victory. She was cataloging someone else's property. I smiled. Not out of joy, there was no joy in watching my marriage end in legal documents and secret recordings, but out of cold satisfaction. She'd underestimated me. Thought I was too trusting, too old, too simple to understand what she was doing. She was wrong, and by the time she realized it, every door she'd tried to open would already be locked from the inside. Saturday morning, I started asking questions about the management agreement, with what sounded like genuine interest, watching my wife's shoulders relax for the first time in a week as she realized I was finally coming around. We were sitting at breakfast. I picked up the manila folder from the table where it had sat since Thursday. I've been reading this, I said, flipping through pages. It's actually pretty thorough. The signatory provisions. It does sound like it could make things easier. Marlene's face transformed. The tension that had been hovering around her eyes disappeared. She reached across and kissed my cheek. I'm so glad you see it that way, honey. I was worried you'd think we were trying to take over. No, I said carefully. I can see how this would help. You're good with paperwork. I'm better with the technical side. She squeezed my hand. Wayne came by that afternoon. I was in the store when he walked in, and I put on my best thoughtful expression. What you and Marlene put together, I said, gesturing to the folder. It's smart. Really thought through. When were you thinking we'd formalize it? Wayne's smile was instant. Maybe before Christmas, get everything settled before the New Year clean slate for January. Before Christmas, 6 days. Let me finish reading through everything, I said. Maybe early next week I like to understand what I'm signing. Of course, Wayne said. No rush. Take your time. But his eyes said something different. His eyes said hurry. The rest of the weekend, Wayne talked freely. About expanding the supplier network after everything's finalized. About reorganizing inventory once the management structure is clear. About contractors he knew who could renovate cheap. Marlene mentioned she'd already talked to 3 vendors about new ordering systems. I nodded, smiled, asked interested questions, took mental notes. They were comfortable. They thought I was convinced. The performance was working. For 40 years, I diagnosed failing systems by listening to what they revealed when they thought everything was fine. Now I was doing the same with my marriage, and every word they said was another nail in their own coffin. Monday morning, I was in the store organizing inventory when my phone rang. Bill Fletcher, a refrigeration contractor I'd worked with on industrial projects for over 20 years, called me with a question that made my blood run cold. Eugene, he said. Quick question. Wayne Dalton, your brother-in-law, Wright, called last week asking if I'd be interested in buying an appliance parts store in Georgetown. Established business, good location, existing supplier relationships. Said it might be available soon. I stood very still. He mentioned you by name, Bill continued. Said it was family circumstances that you were looking to step back. Are you okay? You just opened. You're not selling, are you? I kept my voice steady. No, Bill. I'm not selling. Wayne's getting ahead of himself. Family miscommunication. Ah, okay. I was confused. You've been talking about this store for years. Didn't make sense you'd sell before you even opened. Bill laughed. Tell Wayne if he wants to buy industrial refrigeration contracts, I've got those. But your store, that's yours, man. Thanks, Bill. I hung up and stood there in the middle of my store phone in my hand. Wayne had called him last week, before Vernon filed the protective documents. Before I'd even met with a lawyer, Wayne had been so confident, so absolutely certain the theft would succeed, that he was already soliciting buyers, not just planning to steal it, planning to flip it, sell it to someone else for profit. How many phone calls had Wayne made? How many people in my own industry now believed I was selling the business I'd poured 40 years of savings into? How many knew about the theft before it even happened? I walked to the back of the store and called Vernon. How's the performance? He answered. Wayne is scouting buyers, I said. Just got a call from a contractor I've known 20 years. Wayne contacted him last week asking if he wanted to buy an appliance parts store in Georgetown. Silence for 3 seconds. When exactly? Vernon asked. Last week, before we filed the protections, before I even came to see you. Good, Vernon said. Good. It means he's overconfident, creating evidence of premeditated fraud before the act even occurs. If this goes to court, we can prove intent, planning, conspiracy. He's building our case for us. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. But it also means they're on a timeline, Vernon continued. Wayne wouldn't be talking to buyers unless he was certain the transfer would happen within weeks. They need you to sign soon. But Wayne suggested before Christmas. 6 days. Perfect. Don't commit to a specific date. Keep saying you're reading carefully, you want to understand everything, maybe early next week. String them along. What are we doing? Every day you delay is another day Wayne gets more confident, makes more calls, creates more evidence. We want him feeling successful right up until the moment we show him the fortress we built. Vernon's voice was calm, methodical. Keep performing. Don't let them see any suspicion. And every conversation, every mention of, after we finalize this, every plan they make, remember it. Document it if you can. I'm recording dinners. Good. Keep doing that. We accelerate from here. Accelerate how? I'll explain Thursday when you come in. But Eugene, you're doing exactly what you need to do. They think they're hunting you. They have no idea the trap closed around them Friday at 3:47 p.m. I hung up and stood in the back room of my store, looking at the boxes of inventory I'd carefully selected, the shelving I'd installed, the business plan I'd spent 2 years developing. Wayne had been shopping it to buyers before I'd signed anything, before they technically had control. So confident in his sister's ability to manipulate me that he was already spending money that wasn't his selling property he didn't own. I thought about Friday, about Vernon filing the UCC1 Herald, signing the lease rider the corporate resolution, making it legally explicit that I was the sole authority. Wayne had made his phone calls to buyers last week, not knowing that by Friday afternoon, everything he was promising them would be locked behind legal protections he didn't know existed. He was selling something he could never deliver. And every call he made, every promise, every plan, it was all evidence, all proof, all confession. I walked back to the front of the store. Through the window, I could see Marlene's car pulling into the parking lot. She waved at me, smiling. I waved back. Go ahead, I thought. Make your calls. Plan your sale. Promise your buyers. Every word you say is another piece of evidence in the case you're building against yourself. Tuesday morning, I arrived at my store to find a decorating contractor already inside, measuring my shelves, and my wife pointing at walls, telling him which ones she wanted knocked down. Marlene was gesturing at the partition wall I'd installed 2 weeks ago, separating the customer area from parts storage. What, these shelving units are too industrial, she was saying. We need something more modern, customer-friendly. The contractor Rick from Modern Interiors. A man in his 40s with a measuring tape and tablet looked up when I walked in. Morning. You must be the owner. I'm Rick. Your wife scheduled a consultation about store renovations. Oh, did she? I said. Marlene came over and kissed my cheek. Honey, this is Rick. I thought we could get professional input on maximizing the space. Rick gestured to the partition wall. What do you think about removing this, open up the sightlines? Before I could answer, Marlene touched his arm. He leaves the design decisions to me. I have a better eye for this sort of thing. I smiled. She does. I'll let you two work. I watched them for a few more minutes. Marlene pointing at my layout like it was amateur work needing correction. Rick taking notes, measuring, photographing. I memorized his business card for my evidence file. Wednesday, she brought paint samples, fabric swatches for curtains I'd never planned. She spread them across my counter like it was her showroom. What do you think? The sage green or the warm gray? I stood watching her point at my shelves. My walls, my layout, speaking about them like they were mistakes she was graciously fixing, not the result of 40 years of professional expertise poured into every decision. Whatever you think is best, I said. She beamed. Thursday morning, an email arrived. Order confirmation, business signage from Georgetown Sign and Print. Custom storefront sign. Completion date, December 28th. Payment pending. I opened the attached design file. The sign didn't say Travers Appliance Parts. It said, M. Dalton Enterprises, Commercial Refrigeration Supply. Her LLC. Her maiden name. Not even a mention of mine. I forwarded the email to my hidden account. Then I called the print shop. Georgetown Sign and Print, this is Janet. This is Eugene Travers. I received an order confirmation for business signage. Who placed this order? Keyboard sounds? Ordered by Mrs. Travers on Monday. Pending payment. Once we receive payment, production is 5 to 7 business days. I'll call back to confirm later. I hung up and looked at my current sign through the window. The one with my name. The one I'd chosen, paid for, hung myself. She was planning to replace it. Erase me completely. Before she legally owned anything. Have you ever watched someone try to erase you? Not just take what you built, but replace your name with theirs, as though you never existed at all. Friday afternoon, I was in my car when Vernon called. "We have a development," he said. What kind?" "While finalizing the UCC1, I discovered your wife contacted a separate bank for a business equipment loan. She submitted an application using your refrigeration unit's display cases and inventory as collateral. I went very still. Chuti, the bank flagged it because of our UCC1 filing, called me as attorney of record, asked if I was aware of the application. What did you tell them? That it was fraudulent and unauthorized. The bank denied it immediately and flagged her LLC for potential fraud. She tried to borrow money using my equipment," I said slowly. "In Texas, pledging assets you don't own as collateral is criminal fraudulent conveyance, not civil, criminal. This is evidence of criminal intent." I looked at my store, at the coolers I'd hand-selected, the refrigeration units I'd installed myself based on 40 years of expertise. She'd tried to use them as collateral, without asking, without owning them. "Eugene," Vernon's voice was careful. "Are you there?" "I'm here." From a legal standpoint, it strengthens our position considerably. Evidence of attempted criminal fraud, not just civil conspiracy. When does this end? How much longer can you maintain the performance? They'll want a signing date soon. I checked my phone calendar. December 22nd. Christmas in 3 days. Wayne had suggested before Christmas. "1 more week," I said. "Maybe less. That's all I need. We've built the fortress. Evidence is compiled. Harold is ready. When they make their move, we counter it." "What happens then?" "You tell me when they schedule the signing. I'll be there with documentation they won't expect. We show them exactly how comprehensively they've failed." I hung up and sat looking at the store. Inside were the coolers I'd hand-selected, hand-installed, the shelving I'd chosen and assembled. Every piece represented decades of professional decisions, and she'd tried to use it all as collateral. Tried to borrow money against assets she didn't own using my expertise and investments as leverage for her theft. The decorator had measured my walls for demolition. The print shop was preparing a sign with her name. Wayne was shopping the business to buyers. Marlene had tried to pledge my equipment for loans. Every day, another piece of evidence. Another confession. Another nail. Next week, I thought. Everything ends next week. I drove home. Marlene was upstairs cooking dinner, humming that song she always hummed when she was happy. She thought she was 3 days from victory. From signing that management agreement and watching everything fall into place, the lease transfer, the accounts, the supplier contracts, Wayne as her sub-manager. She didn't know that every piece of infrastructure she'd built was running into legal walls she couldn't see. Harold's signature had locked the lease. Vernon's UCC1 had locked the assets. The corporate resolution had locked the authority. The trap had already closed. She just didn't know it yet. I walked upstairs and kissed her cheek. "Smells good. Chicken and rice, your favorite?" I smiled. Next week, I thought again. Everything ends next week. Marlene called me into the kitchen on Christmas morning. No tree, no presents, no pretense. She stood by the counter with her phone in hand and said she'd found a mobile notary willing to work Friday evening. The week I'd promised Vernon was here. Everything ends next week, I'd thought on Friday. Now it was Monday, Christmas Day, and my wife was setting the exact date and time. I found someone who can come to the store," Marlene said. "Friday at 7, after closing. Nice and private." Wayne sat at the kitchen table, coffee mug in hand, watching me. I let the silence hang, counted to 5 in my head. Then, "Friday works." Marlene exhaled a visible release of tension I wasn't supposed to notice. "Good. I'll confirm with her. We sign, she notarizes, and it's done before New Year. Clean slate for January." Wayne raised his mug. "To new beginnings, I thought she chose Christmas morning for this. The day people think about family generosity giving. The day designed to make you feel guilty for saying no, selfish for protecting yourself. She wasn't just manipulating me, she was using the calendar as a weapon. To new beginnings, I echoed. We didn't celebrate Christmas that year. No dinner, no traditions. Marlene spent the afternoon on her phone making calls. Wayne stayed until evening talking about expansion plans, supplier negotiations, the contractor's timeline for the wall demolition. I listened, nodded, recorded it all. Tuesday morning, Marlene arrived at the store at 9 a.m. with a notebook and her phone. I was arranging inventory when she walked in. She went straight to the counter and started making calls. Yes, this is Marlene Travers. I'll be handling procurement going forward. Send the January order proposal to my email. She wasn't asking, wasn't requesting my approval. She was already acting as though Friday's signing was a formality, the transfer already complete and everything but paperwork. Wayne came by at noon with catalogs. He spread them on my counter, commercial shelving, point-of-sale systems, signage vendors. Once we expand into the space next door, he was saying to Rick, the decorator who'd returned for another consultation, we'll need twice the inventory capacity. That wall comes down, opens everything up. Rick nodded, taking notes. Chuck, Eugene's retiring, Wayne continued. Marlene and I are taking over operations, modernizing everything. Watching them operate the store felt like watching squatters photograph themselves in your house, measuring for new furniture, while you still held the deed. Tuesday afternoon, Marlene cornered me by the parts shelves. To Eugene, you can take Thursday and Friday off if you want. We'll handle things. I'll be here, I said. So suit yourself, she smiled. I just thought you might want to rest before the big transition. The big transition. Like I was retiring, not being robbed. Wednesday, they operated with complete confidence. Marlene ordering stock, Wayne bringing lease proposals for adjacent retail space, both of them discussing modifications and expansions, as though I wasn't standing 10 feet away, listening to every word. I recorded it all. Every phone call, every planning conversation, every casual mention of after we sign, and once this is finalized. Evidence compounding daily. By Wednesday evening, they'd created so much documentation of their intent, so many recorded confessions, that I almost felt grateful for their confidence. At 6 p.m., Marlene locked up the front and said, "See you tomorrow, honey. Only 2 more days." 2 more days, I agreed. She drove away. Wayne followed in his truck. I waited until their cars disappeared. Then I went back inside, locked the door, and sat in the dark store. You know that feeling the night before surgery? That strange calm when all the pre-op is done, consent forms signed, IV port placed. Nothing left but to show up and let it happen. That's where I sat Wednesday at 9 p.m. I'd done everything I could. Vernon had filed the protections. Harold had signed the lease rider. The evidence was compiled in the hidden email account. The recordings were backed up in 3 locations. The conspiracy had been documented from every angle. Friday at 7 p.m. Marlene would bring the mobile notary. Friday at 7:15, Vernon would arrive with Harold and documentation they wouldn't expect. I stood up and walked to the back wall where something leaned wrapped in brown paper. The new store sign. The one Marlene had ordered from Georgetown Sign and Print. I'd intercepted the delivery Tuesday afternoon, signed for it, brought it inside before she could see it. I unwrapped it carefully. Or Dalton and Travers Supply Company. Not Travers and Dalton, not my name first. Wayne's name, her maiden name, first position. I looked at it for a long time. Then I wrapped it back up exactly as it had been and leaned it against the wall. Evidence item number 47. She'd ordered a sign, paid for it, had it delivered, all before legally owning any stake in my business. Physical proof of premeditation, of confidence, of the complete erasure she was planning. I turned off the lights at 9 p.m. and stood in the darkness, looking at the wrapped sign leaning against the back wall. Tomorrow was Thursday. Vernon would call with final confirmation. Harold would review his role. Everything would be positioned for Friday evening. Tomorrow, Marlene would think she was 48 hours from victory, from signing that management agreement, watching me hand over operational control, beginning the transfer of my lease to her LLC, adding Wayne as her designated sub-manager. She'd spend tomorrow imagining her future, planning her renovations, calling her buyers, counting her profit. She didn't know that every door she planned to open was already locked, that every account she planned to access was already protected, that every asset she planned to pledge was already secured under a UCC-1 filing she didn't know existed. I locked the door and walked to my car. The December air was cold. Christmas lights still hung on buildings down the street, blinking red and green in the darkness. I got in my car and sat there for a moment looking at the store through the windshield. My store. The one I'd saved for, planned for, built with everything I'd learned across 40 years. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow Vernon calls. Tomorrow Marlene thinks she's hours from victory. Tomorrow the final pieces fall into place. Friday evening at 7:15 p.m. everything ends. I started the car and drove home. Marlene was already asleep when I got there, dreaming of her new beginning. I lay awake thinking about Friday, about the look on her face when Vernon walked in, about Wayne's expression when Harold explained the lease rider, about the moment they would realize, truly realize, that they'd lost before they'd even begun. Tomorrow. Everything ends tomorrow. The knock on my car window Friday morning came at 6:47 a.m. Vernon Lancaster, holding 2 coffees in a parking lot 3 blocks from the store. Tomorrow had arrived. Everything ends today. I'd driven out early, unable to sleep, and parked here to think. Vernon must have guessed I'd need a final confirmation before tonight's signing. I unlocked the passenger door. He slid in, handed me a coffee. Shakunini katriu. Final checklist, he said, without preamble. UCC-1 is filed with the Secretary of State. Corporate resolution is registered. Harold countersigned the anti-assignment rider Wednesday afternoon. Wednesday, I repeated. Wednesday at 2 p.m., which means for the past 48 hours, while your wife finalized arrangements with the notary and your brother-in-law ordered expansion catalogs, your business has been legally untransferable. I let that sink in. Wednesday. While Marlene was calling suppliers and Wayne was measuring walls, the lease had already been locked. The trap had already closed. They just didn't know it. Even if you sign tonight, Vernon continued, nothing can transfer without me and Harold simultaneously countersigning, which we won't do. They lost before they walked through that door. What time tonight? I'll arrive at 7:15, 15 minutes after the notary. Harold will come with me. We walk in with the documentation, the UCC-1 filing the lease rider, the corporate resolution, the evidence of fraudulent loan application. We present it calmly. We show them exactly how comprehensively they failed. I took a sip of coffee. It was hot, strong, exactly what I needed. How do you think they'll react? I asked. Vernon was quiet for a moment. Shock, denial, possibly anger. But Eugene, you need to understand something. Tonight isn't about revenge. It's about protection, about making sure they can never do this to you or anyone else. I know. Do you? He looked at me directly. Because I've seen these cases go sideways when the victim wants to hurt the perpetrators more than they want to protect themselves. Stay calm tonight. Let me and Harold handle the confrontation. Your job is to be present and safe. I nodded. Vernon finished his coffee. See you at 7:15. He got out of the car and walked to his own vehicle. I sat there watching the sun come up over Georgetown, thinking about tonight. But my mind kept going back to last night, to Thursday evening, to the conversation I'd recorded that would be the final piece of evidence in Vernon's presentation. Thursday at 8:30 p.m. I'd been wiping down the display counter. Store closed, lights dimmed, just me doing the end-of-day cleaning I'd done 10,000 times across 40 years in this business. Marlene had come downstairs from the apartment. I'd heard her footsteps on the stairs, soft and careful. She'd stood in the doorway watching me for a moment. Then she'd walked over, leaned against the counter beside me. "Tomorrow's a big day," she'd said softly. The voice recorder in my apron pocket was already running. Had been running since dinner. "It is," I'd agreed, continuing to wipe. I want you to know," she'd said, and her voice was gentle, almost tender. "After you sign tomorrow, nothing really changes for you. You can still be here every day. Just brew coffee and talk to customers. Let me and Wayne handle everything else. You deserve to rest." Have you ever watched someone you loved speak kindly while dismantling your life and had to smile? I'd set down the cleaning cloth and looked at her. "Sounds wonderful. You built something good here." She'd continued, reaching out to touch my arm. 40 years of expertise in every shelf, every piece of inventory. "We'll take care of it. I promise." The recorder captured every word, every gentle lie wrapped in concern for my well-being. "I know you will," I'd said. She'd smiled then, a real smile, warm and genuine. She'd believed what she was saying. Genuinely thought she was offering me a gift. A dignified semi-retirement where I could still be present without the burden of ownership, the stress of management. She had no idea she was confessing conspiracy to defraud on a recording that would be presented as evidence. Her voice was warm, honey poured over a knife, sweet intention, coding an act that would cut everything away. "Get some rest," she'd said, kissing my cheek. "Tomorrow we start fresh." She'd turned and gone back upstairs. I'd stood alone at the counter I'd wiped 10,000 times in the store I'd built from empty space. The same counter where she'd just promised to take care of what I'd built. The same counter where, in her mind, she'd graciously offered me peace. In my apron pocket, the recorder lay quiet, having done its job. That was Thursday night. Now it was Friday morning, and in 12 hours, she'd bring a mobile notary to this counter to formalize the theft she thought was a kindness. I drove back to the store at 7:30. Opened up. Went through the morning routine, turned on lights, checked inventory, started the coffee maker. Marlene came down at 8, dressed professionally. "Big day," she said, smiling. "Big day," I agreed. Wayne arrived at 9 with a bottle of champagne. "For after the signing," he said. I looked at the bottle. Expensive. The kind you buy for celebrations. "That's thoughtful," I said. The day moved slowly. Customers came and went. I sold parts, answered questions, maintained the normal routine while my wife and her brother made final preparations for 7 p.m. At noon, Marlene showed me the room she'd prepared upstairs. "I thought we'd sign here instead of at the store counter. More comfortable." I set up chairs, moved the dining table. I looked at the setup. 3 chairs. One for me, one for her, one for the notary. She didn't know she'd need 2 more, for Vernon and Harold. "Looks good," I said. At 6 p.m., I closed the store, locked the front door. Went upstairs where Marlene was setting out the signing folder pens arranged neatly beside it. "She'll be here at 7, Marlene said. "Should only take 15 minutes. Sign, notarize, done." I nodded. 6:30. Wayne arrived, still carrying that champagne. He set it on the counter, ready. 6:45. The notary called running 5 minutes late. Marlene said that was fine, no rush. 6:50. I stood at the window, looking down at the parking lot. 6:55. A car pulled in. The notary. 7 p.m. The doorbell rang. Marlene smiled at me. "Ready?" "Ready," I said. She opened the door to let the notary inside. In 15 minutes, Vernon and Harold would arrive. In 15 minutes, everything would end. Marlene lit 3 candles at 6:30 p.m. and set the expensive Cabernet between them, a formal celebration dinner for a signing that would never happen. 15 minutes had passed since the notary called to cancel, apologizing for a family emergency. Marlene had been disappointed for exactly 30 seconds before deciding we'd sign without a notary, make it official Monday. Actually, she'd said, this is better. More intimate, just family. She'd pulled out the good china, set the table like we were celebrating an anniversary, ordered takeout from the Italian place I liked, and arranged it in serving dishes so it looked homemade. Wayne arrived at 6:40 dressed in a button-down shirt I'd never seen him wear. He was carrying that champagne bottle from this morning, already chilled. They sat down across from me. Marlene served the food chicken marsala, my favorite from our early marriage. The meal she'd made the night I proposed, back when I thought I knew what love looked like. Wayne raised his glass. To what's coming next? To family running things right. I raised mine. The candles flickered between us like stage lights on a closing night, beautiful formal final. Marlene ate slowly, smiling between bites. I'm so glad you came around on this, Eugene. I know change is hard, but you've worked so hard for so long. You deserve to rest. I watched the clock above the stove tick toward 7. 6:47, 13 minutes. Wayne placed the manila folder on the table between the wine and the candles. The business management agreement. Their ticket to everything I'd built. Marlene opened it to the signature page. Set a pen beside my plate. Just one signature, she said softly. Then we can really celebrate. Everything's ready, I said, and it was. Vernon was parked 3 blocks away. Harold was with him. Everything was ready. 6:55. Marlene was talking about January, about the new inventory system, about the contractors starting work on the expansion, about how Wayne had found a buyer interested in the current layout if we wanted to flip it instead of expanding. Wayne nodded along, relaxed, confident. 6:58. I picked up the pen, looked at the signature line, looked at my wife across the table, candlelight soft on her face, genuinely believing this dinner honored what I'd built. 7 p.m. The doorbell rang. Marlene looked up, confused. Who would that be? I stood. I'll get it. I walked downstairs to the store's front door. Through the glass, I could see Vernon in a charcoal suit, Harold standing straight beside him, and behind them a man I didn't know in a dark jacket with a badge clipped to his belt. I opened the door. Mr. Travers, Vernon said formally. We're here regarding the business management agreement proposed for execution tonight. I stepped aside. They walked in. Vernon climbed the stairs first. Harold followed. The badge, U.S. Deputy Marshal Reeves, maybe mid-40s with the bearing of someone who'd served papers in more hostile situations than this, brought up the rear. They entered the dining room. Marlene and Wayne were still at the table, the signing folder open between them, the candles still burning. Wayne stood immediately. What the hell is this? Vernon walked to the table and set down a leather dossier beside the manila folder. 2 documents. Side by side. Their fantasy beside my evidence. My name is Vernon Lancaster, Vernon said calmly. I am Mr. Eugene Travers's legal counsel. This is Harold Prescott, landlord of this building and the commercial property below. This is Deputy Marshal Reeves, present to witness service of documents. Harold stepped forward. I am the owner of this building. As of 30 minutes ago, I have served formal notice you have 30 days to vacate these premises. Marlene's face went white. You're evicting us. I have owned this building for 31 years, Harold said. Your lease is month to month. As of tonight, I am exercising my right as landlord to terminate it. You have 30 days to vacate these premises. 4 weeks ago, while Marlene was ordering my new sign, while Wayne was calling buyers, they'd been living in Harold's building, plotting to steal my business from Harold's property. Wayne's folder versus Vernon's dossier. Their fantasy beside my evidence. The pen never moved. Vernon opened his dossier. Business management agreement fraudulent. UCC1 filing fraudulent attempted by Mrs. Travers. Equipment loan application fraudulent conveyance under Texas law. Recorded confessions authenticated under one-party consent statute. He pulled out documents, laid them on the table one by one. UCC1 financing statement filed December 15th, establishing Eugene Travers as sole secured party for all business assets. Corporate resolution dated December 15th, establishing Eugene Travers as sole authorized signatory. Lease anti-assignment rider executed December 20th by landlord Harold Prescott, preventing any transfer without landlord written consent. Bank denial letter regarding fraudulent equipment loan application, submitted by M. Dalton Enterprises. Audio recordings of conspiracy planning dated December 2nd through December 28th. Each document landed on the table like a door slamming shut. Marlene stared at the papers. At Vernon. At me. "You knew," she whispered. "I knew," I said. How long?" "On December 6th. Harold showed me security footage. Wayne's face had gone from red to pale. "This is bullshit. That agreement is legal. You can't just—" The agreement is legal," Vernon interrupted. "But it cannot execute. The UCC1 prevents asset transfer. The corporate resolution prevents signatory changes. The lease rider prevents property assignment. Even if Mr. Travers signed your document tonight, it would be worthless paper." Deputy Marshal Reeves stepped forward. "I'm here to witness that legal notice has been served regarding lease termination and to document any threats or interference." The room went silent. Marlene stared at the two folders side by side, theirs and ours. Wayne's hand fell from the table. The candles still burned. The chicken marsala sat half-eaten on good china. I sat back down in my chair. For the first time in 3 weeks since that phone call from Harold, since the hidden email account, since the voice recorder in my apron pocket, since the performance of trust I'd maintained every single day, I didn't have to act anymore. The trap had closed. They knew it. And I could finally stop pretending I didn't know what they'd been planning all along. Vernon opened the dossier and placed the first photograph on the table between the wine and the candles. A timestamp from October, 22 months before they told me about the business management agreement. The pretending was over. Now came the evidence. Security camera footage. Vernon said, his voice calm and methodical. December 2nd, 8:47 p.m. Mrs. Travers and Wayne Dalton discussing operational control transfer. He slid the transcript across the table. Marlene's words, Wayne's responses, all documented. Email correspondence with Caldwell and Associates business law firm in Austin. Dates from November 22nd through December 20th. Subject lease assignment preparation and LLC transfer documentation. More papers. Email printouts with Marlene's name in the sender field. M. Dalton Enterprises, LLC. Registered with Texas Secretary of State, October 20th, 2023. The same day Mr. and Mrs. Travers first viewed this commercial property, Vernon looked at Marlene. "You registered a company to take his store the same day you saw it, before he'd signed a lease, before he'd invested a single dollar. You planned this from the first moment." Marlene's face was pale. She didn't speak. "Mr. Travers didn't just gather evidence defensively," Vernon continued. "He hired me December 15th to audit your digital trail. The LLC registration and law firm emails you thought were private, we found them all. Equipment loan application," Vernon said, placing another document on the table. "Submitted to Southwest Business Bank December 19th by M. Dalton Enterprises. Collateral listed commercial refrigeration units, display cases, and inventory belonging to Travers Appliance Parts. Assets you didn't own. That's criminal fraudulent conveyance in Texas." Wayne's jaw tightened. Vernon pulled out a small device. A digital voice recorder. Thursday, December 28th, 8:47 p.m., he said. He pressed play. Marlene's voice filled the room, gentle, warm, convincing. She spoke about rest, about taking care of what I'd built, about how I deserved to step back. Wayne said nothing. Marlene's face went white. Vernon stopped the recording after 30 seconds. Texas is a one-party consent state. Mr. Travers was present for every conversation recorded, all admissible, all authenticated this morning by notary. You think evidence feels powerful, but watching someone hear their own voice plotting your erasure just feels unbearably sad. Harold stood. He'd been quiet until now, standing in the corner like a witness to history. Sakai added an anti-assignment rider to the building lease December 18th, he said. Building leased to Eugene Travers, no transfer assignment or modification valid without my written signature and consent. Marlene looked at him. You knew too. I showed Eugene the security footage December 6th, Harold said. I've owned this building 31 years. 5 years ago, a previous tenant lost his appliance store in this exact location. His wife and her brother. Different names. Same pattern. Harold's voice went quiet. That was my younger brother. I watched him lose everything because I didn't know how to help him. Didn't understand business law well enough. Didn't act fast enough. By the time he came to me, it was too late. The room was silent. This time, Harold said, I am stopping it. Wayne pushed back from the table suddenly, stood, looked at Vernon, at Harold, at me, then he walked out. No words. Just footsteps on the stairs, the front door opening, his truck starting in the parking lot. Marlene sat alone across from me. The candles still flickered. The chicken marsala was cold on the good china. The signing folder lay beside Vernon's dossier, worthless paper beside ironclad evidence. Vernon and Harold exchanged glances. Vernon nodded toward the door. They stepped out quietly, leaving us alone. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was the sound of a marriage ending in paperwork instead of screaming. How long have you known? Marlene asked finally. Her voice was small. December 6th, I said. Harold called me, showed me the footage. 3 weeks. She looked at me. You've known for 3 weeks. Yes. You've been acting this whole time. Yes. She was quiet for a long moment. I really thought I was helping you, giving you a way to rest, while taking everything I built. Now, while managing it, there's a difference. No, I said. There isn't. You registered that LLC before I even signed the lease. You were planning to erase my name from the sign. Wayne was calling buyers. You tried to take a loan using my equipment as collateral. I stood up, looked at her across the table one last time. When I knew long enough to do what needed to be done, I said. And I knew long enough to know I cannot forgive you. She didn't cry, didn't argue, just sat there looking at the evidence spread across our dining table. I walked downstairs into the storefront alone for the first time that evening. The lights were off. The display counter gleamed in the streetlight coming through the window, the same counter where she'd stood 24 hours ago, telling me I deserved to rest. I turned on a single lamp, looked at the shelves I'd installed, the inventory I'd chosen, the parts catalog system I'd built, the coolers I'd selected with 40 years of expertise, mine, still mine, protected. Upstairs, I could hear voices. Vernon and Harold had returned, probably discussing next steps. Divorce proceedings, eviction timeline, potential criminal charges for the fraudulent loan application. But down here in my store, it was quiet. I walked to the counter and ran my hand along the glass surface. Thought about every decision that had led here. Meeting Marlene after Margaret died. Trusting her. Marrying her. Bringing her into my dream. And then I thought about Harold's phone call. Vernon's methodical protection. The hidden email account. The voice recordings. The legal fortress we'd built. I'd saved it. Not perfectly, not without cost, but I'd saved it. The store was mine. The business was mine. Tomorrow, I'd still open these doors, still help contractors find the right parts, still use 40 years of expertise to serve customers who valued knowledge over flash. Upstairs, my marriage was ending in legal documents and eviction notices. Down here, my dream was still alive. I stood alone in the quiet store and let myself breathe for the first time in 3 weeks. The sound of Marlene's car backing out of the parking space came through the store window at 8:27 p.m. No argument, no goodbye, just tires on asphalt, and then silence. I stood in the dark store, watching her taillights disappear down the street. She'd walked past me without speaking, carrying only her purse. Everything else, the apartment upstairs, the life we'd built, the 5 years of marriage she'd left behind. Harold came down the stairs a few minutes later. Vernon had stayed upstairs to finalize the eviction timeline and divorce documentation. "She's gone," Harold said quietly. I nodded. He walked over to where I stood by the shelf I'd installed 2 weeks ago. 4 screws, 40 minutes done right. My hand rested on the corner, feeling the solid work I'd put into every piece of this place. "This building held the truth for you when you needed it most," Harold said. I looked at him. "Thank you for not deleting that footage. I know most landlords would have." "I deleted it once before," Harold said. His voice was quiet, heavy with old regret. 5 years ago. My brother, the previous tenant I mentioned, he came to me saying his wife and her brother were acting strange. Asked if the camera system was still active. I told him no, that I'd disconnected everything when I leased the space. Harold looked at the ceiling at the hidden camera location he'd shown me weeks ago. He begged me to turn it back on. Said he needed proof. I told him that was paranoid, that he should trust his wife. 2 months later, they'd transferred his business to her LLC, and he had nothing. Harold's jaw tightened. He asked if I'd kept any footage. I hadn't. I'd believed her story about him having mental health issues, about needing to protect the business from his erratic decisions. "I'm sorry," I said. "I vowed I'd never make that mistake again," Harold said. "When I saw your wife and her brother on that footage planning the same thing, I knew I had a choice. Delete it like my brother asked me to do, or show you the truth." "Some things matter more than rental policies," I said. "Yes," Harold said. "They do." He shook my hand and left. Vernon followed a few minutes later with a folder full of paperwork I'd need to review. I locked the door and stood alone in my store until midnight, just breathing. The following week, Vernon filed divorce papers with fraud evidence attached. Not just a dissolution of marriage, a legal document declaring betrayal, conspiracy, attempted theft. Divorce papers filed with fraud evidence aren't closure. They're the legal notation that someone you loved became someone you had to sue. Vernon also sent letters to every supplier Wayne had contacted. Official notice from legal counsel Wayne Dalton has zero authority to negotiate contracts, make purchases, or represent Travers Appliance Parts in any capacity. Any agreements signed with him are void. Wednesday afternoon, Tom Radford walked into my store. He looked around at the shelves, the inventory, the layout. Then he looked at me. "I heard some things went sideways," he said carefully. "That's one way to put it," I said. "Are you hanging in there?" "Much better now." The truth came out. The business is protected. Tom nodded slowly. "Supply contract still with me." "He always," I said, "unless you don't want it." I want it." Tom extended his hand. We shook. Wayne never had the authority he thought he did. "No," I agreed. "He didn't." Tom hesitated. Full disclosure, Wayne contacted me back in November. Sent a contract proposal, said he'd be taking over procurement. Mentioned family restructuring, said you were transitioning to advisory role. I went still. November. Before I even knew. I called you," Tom continued. Left a message asking if you were aware of the changes. You called back saying everything was fine, no changes to our relationship. So I ignored Wayne's proposal. I didn't remember that call. November, I'd been focused on store setup getting ready to open. Tom had called about something I'd assumed it was routine. You verified, I said. Always verify, Tom said. 40 years in this business, I've seen every kind of scheme. Family members saying they're taking over, first thing you do is call the owner directly. Sometimes the people who save you aren't heroes with grand gestures. They're suppliers who make one quiet phone call to verify authority before signing. Thank you, I said. You're welcome. Tom pulled out his order book. Now you need compressor parts for January, or are you good? We did business. Normal, regular business. Talking about inventory, delivery schedules, payment terms. The kind of conversation I'd been having for 40 years. After Tom left, I stood at the counter thinking about November. About how many other suppliers had called to verify. About how many had protected me without me even knowing I needed protection. The network I'd built over 40 years, relationships based on trust, competence, reliability, had held. Wayne's cold calls couldn't penetrate it. Marlene's claims of ownership couldn't override it. They'd tried to steal my business, but they'd never understood what the business actually was. It wasn't just inventory and square footage. It was decades of relationships, of keeping my word, of being the person contractors called when they needed expertise. You can't steal that. You can't forge it. You can only build it one transaction at a time across 40 years. Thursday morning, I unlocked the store at 7 a.m. The sign Marlene had commissioned still leaned wrapped against the back wall. Dalton and Travers Supply Company. Evidence item 47. Vernon had photographed it, documented it, added it to the case file. Sunlight poured through the front glass, lighting the display counter where she'd stood, telling me I deserved to rest. The shelves I'd chosen and installed. The coolers I'd selected with 40 years of expertise. Mine. Not ours. Not transitioning. Not under new management. Mine. I didn't have to share it with anyone who didn't belong. The divorce would take months. The eviction would be complete in 30 days. Marlene and Wayne would move on to whatever scheme they'd planned next, whatever other person they thought they could manipulate. But this store, this dream I'd spent 40 years saving for, planning for, building toward, was safe. I walked to the counter and started the coffee maker. First customer would arrive in an hour. I'd be ready. Because this was what I'd always wanted. Not celebration dinners and signing ceremonies. Just the quiet work of serving people who valued expertise. The simple dignity of doing what I was good at in a space that was mine. The sunlight streamed through the windows. I started my day. I stood in the parking lot with Rick and Harold as the installation crew bolted the freshly painted letters to the brick facade. The old sign, Dalton and Travers Supply Company with Wayne's name proudly first, had come down the morning after the confrontation. Harold had personally supervised its removal, telling me it was the least he could do. "Oh, it looks good," Harold said, hands in his coat pockets against the December cold. "Clean, honest, your name where it belongs." Rick nodded. "Better than the wrapped one Wayne had made. That thing was never yours to begin with." I smiled despite myself. The wrapped sign sat in the dumpster behind the building, torn paper still clinging to the letters that had spelled out my humiliation before I'd even known to feel it. The crew finished and drove away. Rick clapped my shoulder and headed inside to finish the display reorganization. Harold lingered. "Grand opening still set for Saturday?" he asked. 10 o'clock, I confirmed. "Tom's bringing his crew. Vernon's coming. Even a few customers I reached out to personally." Harold studied the sign, then looked at me. "Eugene, I want you to know what I did 5 years ago, letting my brother's mess disappear. It's haunted me ever since. When Marlene and Wayne started their scheme, I saw the pattern. I couldn't let it happen again. Not in my building. Not to someone like you. I met his eyes. You could have just told me in October. Would you have believed me without proof? He was right. I wouldn't have. I would have dismissed it as paranoia, maybe even fired Vernon before he'd gathered the evidence that saved me. Have you ever realized that the hardest truths to accept are the ones that seem too cruel to be real? Thank you, I said simply. Harold extended his hand. We shook and he walked to his car. I stood alone in the parking lot, staring up at my name on the building. The winter sun caught the fresh paint, making it gleam. For the first time in months, the weight in my chest lifted completely. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. I unlocked the doors at 9:30, an hour before the official opening, and walked through the store one final time. Every aisle gleamed. The new lighting Rick had installed made the products shine. The counter where Marlene had stood where she'd planned my destruction was polished clean. Tom Radford arrived first, bringing 6 of his crew. Wanted to show support, he said, shaking my hand firmly. And to say I'm glad I called you when Wayne reached out. My gut told me something was off. Your gut saved my business, I replied. Vernon arrived next, with his wife, a kind-faced woman who hugged me like I was family. Then came other suppliers, a few neighboring business owners and customers I'd worked with for years. By 10:15, the store was fuller than it had been in months. Mrs. Garrett, who'd been buying paint supplies from me since I opened, approached the counter with primer and brushes. I want to be your first official sale under the new name, she said. I rang her up personally, hands steady on the register keys. When I handed her the receipt, she smiled. This place feels right now. It didn't before, but I couldn't put my finger on why. Now it feels like yours. She was more perceptive than she knew. The morning passed in a blur of handshakes and conversations. People asked about Marlene. Word had spread through the business community, and I gave them the truth. She was gone, the business was secure, and I was moving forward. By noon, the crowd had thinned. Vernon found me restocking shelves. The divorce papers were filed yesterday, he said quietly. Her lawyer didn't contest anything. She signed within the week, no counteroffer. That fast, she knows what evidence we have. Fighting would only expose her further. Vernon paused. Eugene, you did everything right. You trusted your instincts, you asked for help, and you protected what you built. Not everyone has that kind of clarity when their world's falling apart. I thought about October when I'd first suspected something was wrong. The months of investigation, the careful planning, the trap that had closed so perfectly around Marlene and Wayne. It hadn't felt like clarity then. It had felt like drowning. But Vernon was right. I had protected what I'd built, and I'd done it by refusing to look away from the truth, no matter how much it hurt. February brought a thaw. The snow melted, revealing the parking lot lines I'd had repainted in January. Business was steady, better than steady actually, with Tom Radford sending regular referrals and word spreading about the grand reopening. Harold started stopping by Thursday mornings for coffee. Not as a landlord, but as something closer to a friend. We'd sit in my office talking about business, about the building, about the strange paths that had brought us to this point. One Thursday in mid-February, he asked, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't interfered, if I'd just stayed silent?" I considered it. I'd be Wayne's employee right now, or bankrupt, or both. Does that make you angry? It makes me grateful, I said, and careful. I won't miss the signs again. Harold nodded slowly. 5 years ago, I missed them with my brother. I told myself I was being loyal. Really, I was being a coward. He looked at me. You weren't a coward, Eugene. That's the difference. After he left, I stood at the front window, looking out at the parking lot, at the sign bearing my name at the business I'd built, and nearly lost, and ultimately saved. You protect what you build before you understand how far you'll go to defend it. For years, I'd built this business believing hard work and fairness would be enough. I'd learned they weren't. You also needed vigilance, boundaries, the courage to act when threatened. Now I understood completely. The door chimed. A customer entered asking about deck stain. I smiled and led them to aisle 7 where the spring inventory waited. Outside, the February sun climbed higher, and the sign gleamed above the door. My name, my business, my foundation, finally irrevocably mine. And to you listening to my story, remember this trust is built over years, but it can be destroyed in a single moment. Looking back, I wish I'd paid closer attention to the small signs, the whispered phone calls, the unexplained paperwork, the way my wife deflected every question about our future. I trusted blindly because I wanted to believe the best in the people I loved. Don't make my mistake. Verify what matters. Protect what you've built before it's too late. Vigilance isn't paranoia, it's wisdom. What I learned through this ordeal is that family justice doesn't come from anger, it comes from clarity and evidence. When you seek family justice, you're not just protecting assets, you're protecting your dignity and your future. I believe God put me through this for a reason, to show others that you can defend what's yours without losing yourself in the process. Dad's revenge stories like mine aren't about bitterness, they're about accountability. And if you're facing betrayal, know that Dad's revenge stories can inspire you to stand firm and reclaim what was stolen. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced betrayal in business or family? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories about family justice and standing up for what's right, please subscribe to Wise Revenge. Your support means everything to me. Thank you for staying until the very end. As a reminder, certain details in this story have been adjusted for storytelling purposes, but the core message, protecting what you build and standing up for family justice, remains true.